Today, by popular demand, we're going to be taking a look at Suikoden and its impact on traditional Japanese tattooing. Suikoden, also known as Water Margin or Outlaws of the Marsh, was originally written around the 14th century in China, so it's actually a Chinese novel. It was not until around the 1700s that it received a Japanese translation, and it was in the 1800s that it became largely popular in Japan, partly due to artisans such as Utagawa Kuniyoshi and his 108 Heroes of Suikoden. Now, Suikoden is really a compilation of stories of outlaws. It goes through the background stories of some of these outlaws, how they came to run afoul of the law, their outlaw activities, and spoiler alert, but ultimately how they were granted amnesty and came to fight for the emperor. Curiously, some of the characters, such as Kaosho and Kumonryu, actually had tattoos in the original Chinese novel. And then Utagawa Kuniyoshi went ahead and gave all of them tattoos with Japanese-style backgrounds. Along the novel, you get to learn about what the author wanted to portray China as at the time. So it was extreme corruption, extreme violence. And so all these characters, all these outlaws, even though they did some pretty insane things, they were really people of the times. And as such, people could relate and sympathize with some of these characters or some of the things they did because they too felt, let's say, oppression or being taken advantage of or corruption or violence and so on and so forth. It became extremely popular in Edo period Japan. In fact, you can think of it sort of like a hit novel nowadays or some crime TV show or movie nowadays, right? I don't know, some criminal enterprise where people are really into the bad guys. And so it was very popular back then, and it still is now. I mean, look, we're talking about it right now, right? Some of the characters could be quite out there. Kaosho, for example, assumed the identity of a monk to run away from the law, and he was notorious for getting drunk and fighting and accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, killing his opponents. You also had people such as Shuki or Chosei and his wife, who were notorious for chopping up people and then serving them as food at their inns. But not everything was black and white, of course. You know, you also had characters that were initially protecting the people and somehow they came at odds with the law, such as Kumonryu. You also had others who were getting in trouble for protecting others and then accidentally killing their opponents, like Kaosho, who we already mentioned. You had pillars of justice and righteousness, good people who were framed for things they didn't do, and so they also came afoul of the law. And then, of course, you had other characters and scenes such as, for example, acts of self-sacrifice for the group, such as that of Chojun and the famous scene of Suimon Yaburi or breaking the floodgates that became quite a popular theme or scene in tattoos. Now, these guys and gals were sort of twisted Robin Hoods because they stole from the rich and powerful, but then they kept the spoils for themselves. Now, what I want to do next is walk through 5 characters. We'll take a look at the Kuniyoshi renditions, and then we're also going to take a look at actual tattoos. The first character that we're going to be taking a look at is Kaosho, the flowery monk. And he was one of those characters that was originally tattooed in the Chinese novel. So he had these tattoos of cherry blossoms. And like I mentioned about the character himself, he wasn't entirely bad. He just accidentally or not so accidentally ended up killing his opponents, right? He was quick to get hot and heavy, quick to get angry, and his temper would run amok, so to speak, as though he would end up really killing a lot of people. Now, he's one of those characters that really did whatever he wanted. He became a monk to escape the law, but then as a monk, he would still want to drink and he would still want to eat meat, and he would still get into fights and destroy religious artifacts and stuff like that. But then he had his good side where if he saw something that was against his principles, he would step in and then he would try to mediate the situation, which usually resulted in him killing whoever he thought was the person in the wrong. Now, as you might imagine, he's described as a man of incredible strength and character, and so he was a very popular figure within the 108 Outlaws. Taking a look at one of the actual tattoo compositions featuring Kaosho, here we see a work by Asakusa Horicho II. He, of course, is based out of Asakusa in Tokyo, in Japan. And this is a very beautiful composition. You can see, of course, Kaosho in there with his cherry blossom tattoos, the Sakura Fubuki composition. And this is an incredibly artistic, beautiful, powerful rendition of Kaosho in action. Moving to another example of Kaosho, here we see a work by Yosumi from the Horikyo family, based out of Osaka in Japan. And again, you can see Kaosho in there with his tattoos and his weapon. And it just looks, again, fantastic. Very powerful composition. This next character is Kumonryu, or Nine Dragons Crested is the rough translation. And of course, why is he named that way? Well, because he has tattoos of 9 dragons. Kumonryu was the son of a wealthy landowner. He loved to fight, and he became sort of this protector of his village, but eventually he was forced to leave his village and become an outlaw. This tattoo composition that we're looking at is, again, by Asakusa Horicho II, and I wanted to show this one because you see 2 characters in here, which is pretty cool. You see Kumonryu there at the top, right, with his 9 dragons tattoo and weapon in hand, and then you also see Kaosho at the bottom, of course, with his Sakura Fubuki with the cherry blossom tattoos, and they're engaged there in a fight. It's a pretty cool composition to see both characters, and then of course it overall looks fantastic. A second example of Kumonryu in actual tattoos, here we have a composition by Machida Horiken, also based out of Tokyo, and here we see Kumonryu with, of course, tattooed dragons, but then also an actual dragon in there. What's very cool about this composition is that not only do you get Kumonryu with his tattoos, but then also the actual wearer, this person, he also has dragons tattooed across his body. So not only does he have Kumonryu, but then he himself is Kumonryu, so to speak. Now, this wood block print is of a famous scene in the novel. It's called Suimon Yaburi, or Breaking the Floodgates. What we see here is the character Chojun, and he's really sacrificing himself so that the rest of his comrades can, of course, carry on with action. This is an extremely popular scene, again, because sacrificing oneself for the group, a very critical, very important theme in Japanese culture. And of course, it looks badass, right? Looking at the tattoo rendition of the composition, here we have a work by Asakusa Horicho I, based out of Tokyo. This was actually the master of Horicho II, who we saw and talked about earlier. And here we have the scene, Suimon Yaburi breaking through the floodgates. And this is extremely cool because you can see he's standing there on rocks, and you see fish. And the character, of course, is tattooed with dragons. It's a very powerful, very strong piece, and looking very actually classic in terms of the character design itself. Now, the outlaws weren't all men, they were also women. And here we see Sanjo. She was a fierce, very skilled female warrior. You see here breaking arrows, right? Pretty cool, pretty insane, and also pretty cool is just how detailed the clothing or the armor is. The tattoo rendition of it here by Dan Molloy of Perth, Australia, also very impressive. You can see he captured the scene perfectly in there, and it's a fantastic composition that you actually don't see that much in the West. Finally, the last character we're covering, Roshi Ensei. So this character is one of the few who actually survived, because many of them die in the novel. And he was known as a powerful sort of wrestler, and he was extremely smart, very cunning, very diplomatic, very cool character. You can see in the Kuniyoshi rendition that he has this Karajishi bolt-on tattoo given to him. Now, the tattoo rendition here by LondonSlade, based out of Sasebo, Nagasaki, is very true to the original, so that's very cool. And then it's also done in a very traditional style with a very limited color palette. Now, if you're wondering, well, why are these characters, why is this novel so popular in Japanese tattooing? Well, you already got a glimpse of it in terms of the story and the backgrounds of the characters and what they represent. And of course, for the people who know that they're outlaws, they think they look cool. Those who know the stories, they of course appreciate those stories and they want to embody those values and such in their bodies. And those who don't know the stories, well, the tattoos just look pretty darn cool, right? So there are people who don't know about Suikoden, about what this character represents, who this character is, but it just looks cool. And so they're appreciating the tattoo. I mean, it's pretty awesome to have a tattoo within a tattoo. Now, tattoos historically have sort of been in two buckets, one being the ritualistic, religious, or even as a punishment sort of deal. But then the other bucket is, hey, you get a tattoo because it looks cool. It looks cool to you and it looks cool to others. And not only does it look cool, but then there's the symbolism either that comes from the historical association of whatever it is that you're getting, or the symbolism that you give the tattoo itself. Now, one of the questions that I get a lot is, hey, why are you talking about Suikoden in your interviews with Horishi from all around the world, with traditional Japanese tattooers from all around the world? And well, it's because, well, one, it's a very popular topic, even if it's Chinese and not entirely Japanese, but also because it has had a big impact on traditional Japanese tattooing. Big effects in terms of the development of subject matter, big effects in terms of the repertoire of what you can get tattooed, in terms of tattooing techniques, right? You saw how detailed some of those armor and clothing could be. You saw the movement in the character design that obviously enriches tattoo culture. And then you have, well, that tattoo culture itself, not only preserving what has been historically very popular to tattoo, but tattooing these culturally relevant figures and scenes. All that we talked about throughout the video, what these characters and what this novel represents. So for all those reasons, that's why I always throw in the Suikoden piece in my interviews with traditional Japanese tattooers. And that's why I will, of course, keep asking it. Now, this was a very brief, very high-level view into Suikoden and its impact on traditional Japanese tattooing. I hope you enjoyed. If you want me to cover other topics, if you want me to go more in depth, just let me know. As you know, very happy to always provide content that you guys and gals would like to see and hear. So, having said all that, thank you for watching and stay tuned for more content. Thank you. If you would like to learn more about the world of traditional Japanese tattooing, follow the Waboripedia Instagram page, hit like and subscribe in the YouTube and Spotify channels, and stay tuned for the meanings and stories behind Japanese tattooing, Horishi interviews, and more.